But anyway, shall we get started? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Azeroth review, number something, 4, I think. I don't know. Following on from the Tuesday talk, this is just where anyone can just throw out anything they want to say about anything to do with World of Warcraft. Boxing Day today, for those outside the UK, I don't know. I suppose it's... well, actually, we've been having arguments on Discord, in various Discords, Guild Discord, Paladin Discord, and in any Discord I've been in, about even what constitutes Christmas. Apparently, there's some debate, although a lot of that debate is all down to Poland. Poland seem to think it... No, actually, Poland, they don't make sense, Poland. They keep saying it's Christmas on the 24th. Fine, okay, you can have it on a different day, I don't mind that. But then they say that the 25th is the third day of celebrations. So Christmas starts on the 24th, but apparently the 25th is the third day of it. I don't know how that works. Hopefully someone can explain to me. Hi, Gaz. Hello. I did sort of have a good... I say I have a good Christmas. I had a very restful one. Like, I've been... like, Christmas Day, I didn't do anything. I just watched, like, DVDs and stuff. And then, except when I came on last night... Poles always get drunk, though. There's nothing... They're a bit like... They're like the Scots of the continent. They you know, the fact that they get drunk at Christmas is irrelevant. It's like saying the rest of us breathe at Christmas, well, we do it all the year round. So yeah, there's like some discussion about even... So when Christmas starts is a matter of debate, apparently. How long it lasts for is a matter of debate. For some people, it's already over. Some people, it's going to go on for some time. I'm going to adjust this thing. Hang on, where's that gone? Because that's not quite in the right place. Where's my natural head position going to be? There, that'll do. And yeah, it's Boxing Day here. Used to be St. Stephen's Day. It's always been a celebration in England, and I'm not sure how much in Wales and Scotland and Ireland, but in England at least, it used to be St. Stephen's Day until like the 19th century, and then it became Boxing Day, because it was really for wealthy people who had servants. Their servants would have to work all of Christmas Day, which wasn't very, you know, very nice. So what these wealthy people would then do is the next day they would give them presents, you know, in boxes, hence Boxing Day. So now it's called Boxing Day, where we basically have football, although my team doesn't play today, so I get to watch them lose tomorrow instead. And in various parts of the UK, it is traditional. I have not engaged in this tradition. Or thankfully, I'm quite far away from the coast. But on Boxing Day, it's a tradition in lots of parts of the UK to run into the freezing cold sea. For some reason. I don't know why. So that's what they do. But, hi, Morellis. So, and Hugh Jackman there. So, yeah, that's second Christmas Day. Okay. I don't know anything about that, but yeah. So that's what it is at the moment. So from my point of view, there's supposed to be 12 days of Christmas, which really this is like the second. Although it has much less significance after now, because of course in next week it'll be New Year's, and that'll be the key significant bit. And then, you know, on the 3rd I go back to work, so I have to make sure that I've got something decent done by then at least. But yeah, so I So what did I do? Yeah, late last night I decided, right, I'm going to play Star Wars The Old Republic, and I've been playing quite a lot of the Star Wars this holiday. And, you know, I went to bed at a reasonable time, because the thing is, and I don't know what this is, I was like a kid, and it wasn't anything to do with excitement, just for some reason I just didn't go to sleep on like Christmas Eve. I don't know why. Hi, Red Wing. First time catching live, but following all of these. Oh, thank you, Rao. Well, yeah, so if there's anything anyone wants to discuss, because in the meantime, I'm just going to end up talking about Christmas. But yeah, the bottom line is, I went to bed at what I would call a reasonable time, 2 o'clock in the morning. For a holiday, that's a reasonable time. And I woke up at a reasonable time, but I just didn't get up. I just couldn't be bothered to get up. So I got up this afternoon. I don't usually get up in the afternoon. I usually moan at my students for doing that. But for some reason today, I just got up in the afternoon. I thought, I'll have a rest. I didn't have anything desperate to do. And then since I've been playing Star Wars again, since all that time, I still have to go and see this film at the cinema. Things keep putting me off, though. Like, I don't like... It seems to me there's been a lot of people who didn't like it. So I'm thinking, ooh, am I not going to like it? But yeah, so... Anything anyone wants to talk about? Any little topics for discussion? Because there hasn't been any new news as such. In fact, the WoW Flash this week is going to be a bit tricky, but I do have an idea for that. But that's tomorrow. I shall do that tomorrow. I have a cunning plan for WoW Flash, because there's only like one bit of news I can even think of. And that is, and I have to try this out myself, apparently the Christmas presents light under the Wintervale tree in Ironforge and Orgrimmar is bugged. So I went to get it on my Paladin yesterday, and I got the little Stormwind toy set. Obviously, I need to go on a Horde character to get the Horde equivalent. That's fine. That's no problem. The problem is, and I thought this was funny, you're supposed to get a Hearthstone toy thing, and I didn't. Apparently, that doesn't work if you do it on a character that has done a previous Wintervale. There's some bug. So you have to create a new character or have a character you've created since last year. How am I finding my Memento? I'm still using it. It's quite difficult to tell. Like in terms of simming, it still sims roundabout the same as any other trinket I could put in the same slot. So I have a 960 Memento of Angerboda. I have a 945 Seeping Scourgewing, which if it was at the same item level, I would use that for single target. But when I've used the Seeping Scourgewing myself, even though it sims a little ahead, in reality... it doesn't perform quite as well, and the reason for that probably is because what sims don't take into account is other people dying, because that triggers Memento as well. So unless you're going to get to a situation where you don't expect anyone to die, you might as well just carry on using Memento. So yeah, I am still using my Memento there. I mean, I don't have a lot for it to compete against, though, really. I have that 975 Chrono Shard, but I'm not using that. I have a 945 Scourgewing, as I say. That's pretty much it. You know, I also have a 910 Arcana Crystal, but that goes in the other slot. So I don't really have any... I don't have, for example... I mean, where there will be a real decision to be made is if I get the Pantheon Trinket. Now, if I get Ammon Thul's, then that's fine. I mean, that's the one I obviously really want. The problem is, let's say I get the other one, the epic one, which probably by the time I get it now, let's say I get it tomorrow, it will have, I'll be able to upgrade it to the point where it'll probably be an upgrade in raids at any rate, and it's a case of what I do without, because if I do without my Arcano Crystal, I lose a lot of secondary stats. You still haven't received a Grumpus. Actually, I have not really been in at all. I have been neglecting my Christmas duties in games. I've only done 2 days worth of stuff on my Paladin and nothing on any other character. So I don't deserve a Grumpus. I did do it on several characters a day last year, though, and got nothing. And I haven't been into Elder Scrolls Online either. I don't know what... So I'm playing Star Wars: Your Republic at the moment. I'm not even doing the Christmas stuff in there, so I'm just not doing Christmas stuff anywhere. So I need to sort myself out. I at least need to do, you know, the stuff for the World of Warcraft stuff. And I ought to go... Elder Scrolls Online as well is quite good, because you get the daily things, but you get patterns and stuff like that, which, you know, last year were quite good. And I don't know what they look like this year, but I imagine I'll regret not doing them. So maybe... I don't know how long it's got to last as well. I maybe need to get myself into ESO. Maybe I'll do that. Because I'm likely to be streaming some gameplay after this. Not immediately after this. Or maybe immediately after this. I don't know. But I don't know what I'm going to stream yet. I might just go into ESO and do some stuff there. Because I've been neglecting that. So, Arcano, you still probably relinquish no luck with that. Yeah, the problem is there's so many of them. Someone did suggest a bit of advice, though, for the Arcano Crystal. If you're trying to get the Arcano Crystal from the unrelinquished vendor, and that is to pick a spec, if it's possible, that has fewer trinkets. So I was advised, I don't know whether this is true or not, take it with a pinch of salt. I was advised that as a Paladin, if you selected Holy Spec, you have a slightly higher chance because there's not as many Holy Trinkets. I don't know whether that's true or not. But the concept is sound, I suppose. If there is a spec that your class has that has fewer trinkets than others, then obviously that gives you a slightly increased chance of getting, because the Arcano is for any spec. Does unequipping tier 20 4-piece skew your stat priority more towards haste? Possibly. It depends what you equip it with, though. That's the thing. By unequipping it, you're going to put something else in. In theory, getting rid of the set bonus may do that, but it depends on other things as well. The only way to do it is just to sim, as always. But it will obviously take you you won't generate as much holy power, therefore you won't cast as many spenders. Oh, you got the Flames of Ragnaros. I can't remember what I have of those two enchants. I'm not sure I've got the Flames of Ragnaros. It's been available for a few years now, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. I haven't had anything this year, but as I say, I've only done it like twice on like one character this year. That stuff. So I don't really know. I has been very lazy with that. But I will have to do some stuff in WoW though next week, because it's time walking again, isn't it? It's mop time walking, which I suppose is the easiest time walking, because mop was like the expansion where all the dungeons were like easy to just blast through. So at least that won't be terrible. But yeah, time walking again, which means you get a coin with the time walking stuff, don't you? I'm pretty sure you get a coin and a cash. So you got 942 eye level going to get the mage tower done. Oh right, yeah. Yes, the prots thing. I need to do it at some point. I'm not desperate to do it right now, but at some point I need to do that one as well, because that look is, even though I'm not bothered yet using it at the moment, I will not want to let Legion come and go and then I'll never be able to get it again, because it looked like some effort went into producing that. It looks pretty good, and hopefully it feels good when you're actually using it yourself. The big question is whether I do it on my warrior as well, because that's got the same sort of deal there. Again, I may regret it if I don't. But that, for my warrior, that possibly would involve gearing it up a little bit, because although, in fact, I don't think actually my warrior has got in. I haven't done very much on it since I dinged it, and that was a long time ago. I haven't really done much on it. So I would actually have to gear it up first. Don't know. I'll have to see. But we've just got, I mean, next reset, we've got another reset of no progress, then we'll hopefully start back. Although I am hoping we can get all the farm done this week. Well, I say this, the current week, the week that's about to finish, we didn't get Iminar down, which we have killed. But we lost a lot of time on some bosses that hopefully we won't do this week. The Mage Tower Brute, well, I think it's the nature of it is it's unforgiving. Like the tanky one, I think, knocks you off. I think that's the key thing with the tank one that gear won't really help you with, I suppose, is that you get knocked off, and there's nothing going to save you if you get knocked off the platform or the rock or whatever it is it's supposed to be on. But that's why when I go around to do it, I'm not just going to work it out myself. Bugger that. I'm going to actually watch videos and go, okay, this is what we do, and then hopefully that'll reduce the amount of time it'll take me to do it. Because it's only time. I've got absolutely ridiculous numbers of nether shards. I can keep going and going and going if I want. Well, we did kill Iminar. We killed it at the reset before this one. But we can't progress over Christmas because we're just doing a couple of raids each week. Like we do Wednesday, Thursday this week, because obviously Christmas was Sunday, Monday was Christmas. And then next week, Sunday, Monday is New Year's. So we're just going to be raiding tomorrow and Thursday just to farm. And then get back onto progress the week after that. But the guild, I'm not expecting a rapid rate of progress. just that it would be done in a reasonable amount of time. But in a couple of weeks as well, we should start to hear about beta stuff happening. But I'm just checking. I haven't heard anything more about that yet. I imagine at this point you need to start skipping the first 5 bosses as soon as you get the telepad. No. What? No, you don't skip bosses. Behave. It should take no time to kill bosses. Farming bosses should take no time at all. Skipping bosses is potentially for those who like do 1 or 2 days a week. The way to not lose progress time if you do, you know, a decent schedule is to not waste time wiping, surely. And then get more benefit from the gear. Because my item level is way behind, like some people, when people are sort of linking their item level. I'm not meaning in the guild, I mean like in other guilds, faster progress guilds. So you can't even say you don't need the gear. So no, there never should be a point where you're skipping them. Might come a point where you're skipping the heroic ones. Why? I mean, seriously, you're getting gear upgrades, and you should just kill. Like, there shouldn't be a boss before Agrimar that, if you've killed it once, you should be able to kill it again. And you should be able to, within a couple of weeks, if people are doing it properly, one-shot them. No, you certainly would not want to skip the relics from High Command. Even though, High Clefado, I would have no confidence that get anything decent. Like, my luck on the Biss relic, like, we've had, in every tier, to be fair, we've had a Biss relic. So in Nighthold, we had the Biss Holy Relic, which dropped off the second boss, but it never ever dropped so much as a Warforged, let alone a Titan Forged, until right at the end of the tier. Then it dropped basically 2. I got one, the other Rec got one. Then in Tomb of Sargeras, Fire Relic, it only ever once dropped a Titan Forged Fire Relic, and that was on the day when I was on my Rogue, gearing that up for Fallen Avatar. Bloody annoying. But again, it only dropped 1 out of the whole tier. And then, so I've got no confidence that Antoran High Command is going to start. And again, there's another Ret in the guild as well. So I've got no confidence it's going to be dropping any decent ones. But yes, just on the off chance it did, you don't want to be missing that boss. Because that's the problem as well with Titan Forge. Like, I would even though I've now, have I? I think I've got 2 960s. In terms of relics. So the baseline ones are not a guaranteed upgrade. They could be depending on traits. One of my 960 Holy Relics does actually have Biss traits on it, but the other one doesn't. So that could be an upgrade. But it's not the baseline I really want, it's the Titan Forge. But just in case, you know, I have to be in on it. That's the problem with Titan Forging, really, isn't it, for Mythic raiding? You can't really say, oh no, you can only really say you don't want the boss if it just drops crap loot. Like the doggies I can say I don't need, because it's crap loot. Portal Keeper I can say I don't need, because again, crap loot. But Antoran High Command, Aenar, Imanar drops the tier legs, you know, which are the best, you know, they're the only haste mastery pieces of tier. Well, Safian, you say ranking matters more than gear. Obviously, ranking matters more than gear, but the argument is that the gear helps you get the ranking. So, if you miss out on something, like extending, you can understand extending for the last boss of the tier if you are going to get it that week. If you don't get it in that week, then you've wasted. It's a complete waste. Because you can argue that 1 more gear of upgrades, especially with ever diminishing upgrades, but you will still get upgrades. No one at this point is going to go through all their farm content and not get any upgrades. That's just not going to happen. So you'd only do it for the last boss. Anything else, you're just turning down gear. And it's all right, people saying, well, we don't need it because Method did it without that. But you just reduce your margin for error. And for every like 1% wipe you had, well, that wouldn't have been a wipe. And how long does it really take to clear it? Because you should be getting to a point. If you're in a guild that's getting towards Argus or on Argus now, you should be able to clear all the other stuff pretty much as quickly as, you know, in a night, no more than a few hours. Yeah, well, that's the thing, Safian. If you once you've killed a boss, I mean, you might have had a lucky kill on your first kill, but the second week you do it, you should get a lot better at it. And then the third week, you should be able to. If you don't one-shot it, it's either because you're bringing new people on it. But by the third week, should you be doing that if you've got a tight roster? Or then the second reason is people pissing about or trying to rank, thinking, oh, it's on farm now, this is my time to rank. You know, that's just, you know, that's the players cocking it up then. But it should be progress. Your farm, after a couple of weeks, should be fast. So it should always be worth doing. A lot of extended is people not thinking they could kill the second to last boss. Avatar wasn't hard. You just needed people to do their jobs. I really didn't see a lot of the difficulty of Avatar. If people just all of the difficult, like obviously it was. I mean, the guild I was in. I mean, a lot of the guild. I mean, now must have had a difficulty on it as well. And took an embarrassing amount of time over it purely because there were some people with the purple doing the purple beam thing who didn't move into their purple beam in time, or there were some people who didn't go out and soak their touch of Sargeras, or or they were dropping the purple shit all over the tanks. It was always someone doing the very simple thing that they shouldn't have done, or failing to do the very simple thing that they should have done. So, I mean, Avatar was a complex one from the raid point of view, but from an individual's point of view, you knew what your job was. But if you can kill it once, there was nothing on Avatar, on any stage of Avatar, that if you could kill it once, you couldn't kill it again. You just maybe had, if you were doing it very early on in progress, in the tier, you just maybe had to not really take people who hadn't done it, because once you'd got a raid that killed it, maybe just stick with those for a few weeks before you started bringing other people in on it. But in this particular tier, I don't know that there's any bosses like that. Because even Coven, like I would think at the moment, oh, Coven looks actually quite tricky. But in actual fact, it doesn't necessarily seem to be, depending on how you approach it. Fardian was linking me his guild's Coven kill. And not only did it look quite smooth, but someone even noted at the end of it that it was, was quite a straightforward fight in the end. I think sometimes as well, sometimes I think what it is with fights is sometimes people use a more complicated strategy that makes it more difficult for some people. I remember, and this is going back to vanilla, it's not directly comparable, but I was in a guild of vanilla that when we were partway through Blackwing Lair, I then changed guilds. But Razorgore, the first boss in that guild, raid, we came up with a really simple strategy for dealing with it. And then I went to the next guild, which was actually the top realm, so it was ahead of where I was, top guild on the realm, and they had a super complicated way of doing it. And they used to still wipe on it. Now, in the guild I was in, we didn't wipe on it. Once we killed it the first time, we never wiped on it again. And I think sometimes the same thing is the case. Sometimes your strategy is just because of what you've got in your roster, what you've got available. But I think with some people, they do it in such a way that doesn't make it easy. Oh, you say that, Safian. Coven is easy to bring 3 melee. Fardian's guild, they had 5 melee. They used the melee as part of the strategy. So, I mean, I was thinking the same before I saw that. I thought, oh, melee, bit of a problem, aren't they? They are if you do it in the way you might think of doing it. But there is another way of doing Coven that means you use your melee. So, in actual fact, you can have melee on Coven. Just depends how you do it. Obviously, you still want multi-dotters. There's no getting away from that. But, hi, Willow. Oh, well, Agrimar, certainly, yeah. But, I mean, I don't have to worry about Agrimar yet. I mean, we ain't there. We're not getting there anytime soon. No, well, Safi, that's what you're quite right about. People tend not to... Once you've got because I think I seem to remember you when I was in my last guild, the latter parts of Guild Jaden, streaming, and you were saying, oh, perhaps you should do this. And we're at that point, because any guild will do this. Once you're at a point where you sort of feel you've gone through all the stages, whether you've killed it yet or not, you don't really feel like changing it. Because you might have to then start progressing right from the start again. So, you know, I mean, if I was your raid leader, something I would agree with that. If you've already killed Coven, you wouldn't change the way you were doing it just yet, because you can change it up once you've finished the raid tier. It's not where, yeah, it depends how far you've gone in, but if you've sort of basically done all the various bits of it and you're just trying to put it together, yeah, that's not really a time where, unless you really think that the way you're doing it is just badly wrong, you don't really want to change it at that point. The time to change it is really at the start. And that's why I think people shouldn't have more of an attitude of trying things out at the start. That's why I always hate coming into progress part way through. I want to, you know, because you get that situation where, let's say you're on the bench and progress, and your guild's done it for a couple of nights, something like that. And then you come in, for whatever reason, either someone's away or someone was just constantly fucking it up and you need to get rid of them. And then you're thinking, at that point, you don't have the chance to try things out. Because if you start dying, people get pissed off with you. Because everyone else has done all that and they want to move on. So you have to play it safe. Playing it safe is never playing it best. You can never do your best job playing it safe. You have to sort of risk. But yeah, when you're already when everyone else has done their risk and learn, that's not the time for you to do it. So it's always better to be in on progress right from the start. Because then you get that chance, because you're not expected to kill it first time. So you get to just try mad things out. Well, the thing is, Red Wing, well, when it comes to balance, and this applies to anything, whether it's PvP always has the biggest debates over balance, of course. And that's where it's easiest to explain it as well. Because it's very difficult to balance unless you've got a particular content in mind. Like, I think you can balance classes for raiding purposes. But it's not easy to balance them for raiding purposes and to balance them for dungeon purposes. Because apart from anything else, the balance of the roles is completely different. In a dungeon, you have 1 tank, 1 heal, and 3 DPS. In a raid, it doesn't just scale up to those same proportions. So, but in PvP, you have the same thing, don't you? You know, you can balance for, say, 3v3 or 5v5 or 10v10 or something like that. You can't balance for like 40v40, 20v20, 10v10, 5v5, 3v3, 2v1, sorry, 2v2. 2v1 would be very unfair. 2v2 and 1v1. You can't do all that. I remember in what was it now? Warhammer Online. When I played Warhammer Online, which was actually quite good from the PvP point of view, there was, what was it now? Was it Marauders? Marauders were really, really strong one-on-one. We had a Marauder in our guild. I'm pretty sure it was a Marauder class. It was the melee DPS option for Chaos. And super strong in 1v1. But most of the content wasn't 1v1, so it was fine. They weren't considered the overpowered one. The ones that were considered overpowered were the mages, the wizards, bright wizards, that was it. I'm forgetting my vernacular now, on the order side. Because 1v1 they weren't powerful at all, but in a big old group, my God. So that's the issue with balance. I think it is difficult to balance. I mean, that's why they went for the fixed raid side for the hardest mode, the fixed 20-man mythic, because they couldn't do the 10-man and 25-man and keep it equal, because you can't really balance for both of those things. But indeed, raids will often have gimmicks. It's not that you can't they can't balance it. It's just that they just need better coordination between class. They just have to accept that it's all right saying they just need classes to feel different to each other. They don't actually need them to be different. For example, melee, all melee DPS get an interrupt on no more than a 15-second cooldown. Some of them get it on a 12-second cooldown. Some it's ranged, for example. I say some. Enhancement Shaman, for example, get a ranged one. So there's slight little tweaks there. But by and large, melee DPS get an interrupt on a reasonably short cooldown. Why is that? Why not ranged as well? Because melee will be the ones, if there's going to be one, that do an interrupt rotation. And they need the same attitude to various things, because you get, I mean, the soaks is the classic one. You get soak mechanics. I mean, I know Tomb of Sargeras was just, you know, like soaks on crack, but you get soak mechanics on more fights than you get interrupt mechanics, and yet they understand that sod class fantasy and uniqueness, every melee needs an interrupt. But they don't take the same attitude to other things for which you need a utility to deal with. I think that's where a lot of the problem comes. They just have to suck it up. Make them play differently, but still accept that utility might have to be a bit more homogenous than it is. I only say a bit more. I'm not saying you give everyone exactly the same things. But you have to, you know, when it comes to things like movements, defensives, and any other utility that can help you deal with a mechanic, there needs to be a much greater range of classes that get access to them. Nighthold was the skip mechanics with raw damage for general melee. Well, the Nighthold one's certainly true, because this is what made, like, if you compare, for example, the last two bosses in those tiers, so Elisand and Gul'dan, you compare them with Fallen Avatar and Kil'jaeden. With Elisand and Gul'dan, by the time I got to them in the guild I was in, they were easy fights, because the DPS you could do allowed you to push phases before they got difficult. So those fights became much simpler. Moving on to Fallen Avatar and Kil'jaeden, obviously having more damage helps, but you didn't get rid of the worst mechanics by having the more damage. So they still took a long time to learn. Too long. Now, I'm not going to say that one system is better than the other, but they were very, very different from that point of view. I'm not quite sure what's going to be the case with, you know, if we compare, say, Agramar and Argus at the end of it all, because I haven't done them. Kil'jaeden, you could be punished for too much damage. Oh, well, yes, certainly. Actually, I mean, that was the thing. The very first time I did LFR, that was exactly what caused that problem. The fact you can't tell LFR, you can't tell an LFR group to stop DPS, and that was what snookered it. The fact that, yeah, if you had those ads up when it went dark, you were buggered, indeed. But that's a relatively straightforward thing to do there. Well, yes, Safian, but that's above a certain level then. But there's a point at which, with Kil'jaeden, you might have had to stop DPS. to transition it properly. But you can do that in a coordinated group. You just have to know whether or not you can push it or not. And if you can't, you just have to say stop DPS. Or you need to do it differently, like on Agrimar, because Agrimar, like we wiped a few times on Heroic this week, but that's because we were going to do it. We did it very differently, specifically for future-proofing it. Because on Agrimar, the way we originally did it was no good, because with more damage, we have to stop DPS to manage the ads before we can afford to let him transition. But what we did instead, with this week, we changed the strategy to a more aggressive dealing with the ads so that we wouldn't have to stop DPS. Because otherwise we were running the risk of having to stop DPS for a whole minute just to manage the dots when you kill those fire ads. You can't coordinate in LFR, no. That's why like Blizzard took the view, they stated, and I don't disagree with the sentiment, that when it comes to LFR, they wanted one meaningful mechanic in there. They sort of get rid of lots of them, but they want one meaningful mechanic. The problem was on Kill Jaden, I think they chose incorrectly. Because, I mean, I thought it was a bit funny having all those soaks to do on the Armageddons. But that actually turned out all right, because you can tell people in LFR, do you know what? If you don't go out and soak, we're going to take all this damage, people are going to die, we're going to wipe. And people will understand that. But you cannot say, you cannot manage DPS. You cannot say, right, there's going to come a point here where we might need to stop DPS. Because they won't. They just won't. Not everyone does it, even in a guild. I mean, you know, I've seen it in the guild I'm in now and the guild I've been in and stuff like that. When you call for people to stop DPS, you know, I'm melee. I take a few steps back, so I'm not even in melee range of my target. You can still see people hitting it in front of me. Because some people will take the view, well, if one person DPSs, it'll be all right. I'll just DPS it because I don't want to get a bad rank. Yeah, the buff of yes. Well, any boss where transitions are based on percentage rather than time will obviously be affected by increased DPS that you do each week. That will change it. Mistress certainly, yeah. The nature of the fight could change quite a lot with extra damage or a little bit less damage. But any fight where you've got, and where you have a mixture of them, you can also get mechanics running together that didn't used to run together. So if you have some mechanics that are time-based and some mechanics that are percentage-based, then yeah, you can get them running together in unfortunate ways as well. So there are some fights where you constantly have to be alive to that. I don't think you get loads of fights like that, though, to be fair. You just get a few. I mean, Mistress was one of those tough fights in there. Like, there always seems to be 3 tough fights in a tier. And the last one is Mistress, Avatar, and Kill Jaden. Don't really know what it is this time. I mean, obviously Agrimar and Argus. I don't know. Is the other one Coven? Probably. But again, it might depend how you do it. And what you've got to do it. I mean, I suppose if you're a guild that's got loads of Warlocks and Boomkins and they're all good players as well. You reckon King Garoth? I don't know. I mean, I don't know any of these till I've tried them myself. I've not heard a lot of people complaining about King Garoth, particularly. I've certainly heard that Varimethras is quite straightforward for all of that change they made after the first week. Hardest part about Mistress is stopping hunters from... Well, it wasn't just hunters and boomers, anyone from killing the ads too early. For us, we had a lot of classes with a lot of very high cleave potential. And passive cleave, even when you weren't trying. So that was a massive issue for us. And we had a massive number of DPS whores as well, who would always try and sneak in a bit of extra. But I mean, all of the, you know, Tomb was just, it was just a bad one for us. Well, for where you are progressed, Safian, I don't think you can. I don't know what you consider your pool to be comparing it to. It clearly can't be below average on mechanics. I mean, let's just have a little look here. If we have a look at WoW progress. So you're on Agrimar at the moment, is that right? If you're on Agrimar, you are either just outside or roundabout in the top. You're certainly in the top 1% of guilds. So I don't believe you can say it's below average on mechanics. Unless you're just judging your guild on top 100 or something like that. But also it's very difficult to know where, because without being in a guild, sometimes it's difficult to know what the relative strengths and weaknesses of a guild are. Well, it depends what you mean by comparable to others, a comparable progression. If you're comparing yourself to people who've killed Coven but not Agrimar, again, I mean, that's a good 100-odd guilds. It's a bit difficult to compare. You can't have been in those 100-odd guilds. That might just be your perspective. Because maybe you as a person think that there's too many people in your roster don't do the mechanics properly, and therefore you think you're below average. Dealing with mechanics mostly is an attitude anyway. Because anyone that can do the bosses can do the mechanics. Execution rankings. I don't know. The execution rankings are a big thing. Because it could well be that if you're faster speed and not so good execution rankings, it could well be that your strategies are more based on kill it quickly, kill it before it kills you. So that could be like a judgment of your strategies rather than your players. There's always another explanation. You have to be very careful about, you know, drawing links between things. Find a lot of your melee DPS like to skip mechanics. Of course, most DPS like to skip mechanics. Mechanics don't show up on the meters. It's not just melee DPS either. They're just potentially a bit more brazen about it. What I mean is there's no meter that shows you high on it when you deal with the mechanics properly. Because there couldn't be anyway, because as I say, different people deal differently with them. Well, it's not, to be fair, it's not cheese if the ads do have to die. It's only cheese when they don't, or when they don't have to die quickly and would die to passive cleave in enough time. That's when it's cheese. Or if it's at a particular, sometimes it's a particular time. If it's a particular time where you have to burst down a particular mob very quickly, and it doesn't matter if the ads survive a little bit longer than you deal with the ads after that period of time, you know. But if you're in a general situation where there's no particular need to do single target and the ads do have to die, then it's not cheese then. Well, the thing is, Gaz, the thinking behind it for a lot of people is they don't care if the raid wipes a few more times. They don't care about that. They care about what... And they also understand that they're not going to get a pass if the boss doesn't die. Oh, no, you say, Safian, you say no one wipes the raid on purpose. No, they do. They may not in your guild. I have known people who will quite happily... I don't mean deliberately suicide because they're on a bad log. But there are people who will... all they care about is that when the boss dies, that they get a good rank. They don't care if it takes a lot longer for that boss to die in order to achieve that. I've known that. I've been in a guild one time where that was the raid leader's attitude. Imagine that. So there was no one, you know, there was no one even overseeing them and calling them out on it when they did it. There are people that absolutely have the attitude. They understand. They're not stupid. They know that because here's how it works. It's basically playing chicken with some of these people. They know that mechanics have to be done in order for the thing to do. But where a mechanic isn't assigned, it's just someone has to do this thing. Take Goroth as a classic example, first boss in Tomb of Sargeras, where you had to go out and soak the brimstone. So, you needed quite a lot of the raid to do that. What did you need? Just to be safe, you probably needed about 3 people in each one. Okay? A tank, I suppose, could do one, but you generally didn't want them using their, you know, mitigation for that, because other people should have done it. And there were 3 of them. So you sort of needed 9, about half of the raid to go into those. You don't need everyone to go in. So you'll get some DPS who won't go in because they'll think, you don't need everyone in, so I can stay here. But then what happens when you get all the DPS doing that? You don't get enough going in. So you get some people whose attitude is, right, we wiped because of that, but they're waiting for enough people to think, sod it, the boss isn't dying like this, I'll go and do the bloody mechanics. They're just going to wait for enough people to do that while they stay DPSing the boss or killing or doing whatever. That's how some people actually think. But there are absolutely people who do not care about wiping the raid. In fact, they would rather it wiped than that they get a bad rank. But that's just the nature of it. Because it's the same in any sport as well. People are more interested in the thing that shows lots of numbers by their name. Like in football, for example, what do people focus on? Goals. Who scores the goals? That's why you very rarely get anyone, you know, chanting the name of a defender. Because they prevent goals. All right? Or a midfielder that creates opportunities. That's a bit more common, but still not as common as a prolific striker. The best strikers in the world are far more famous and revered than the best midfielders, and they are more revered than the best defenders. Action Man, you can't actually do that. Life gripping meter horse when they use their cooldowns. That's not helpful. It was always tempting before Legion. Bleed, you can't do it in Legion anymore. It doesn't work. But it was always tempting in the past if there was a particular DPS horde, particularly if they were a warrior, when they got into execute range, the usual putting a bop on them. That didn't impress them one bit. But I never actually did it because that's, you know, that's counterproductive. Yeah, but Nesta and Maldini have not won the Ballon d'Or. There have been the odd smattering of defenders that have won that, but how many do it? And then look at it this way. Let's say the Football World Cup, you get, as well, obviously there's a team that wins it, but on a personal level, there's the Golden Boot. That's for the player that scores the most goals. You don't get an equivalent one. Oh, hi, Raskas. This is your first time, is it? Welcome. Well, Gaz, the thing is, though, I mean, this is sort of the beauty of it, but in that there are different classes and they play in different ways. Some people like the jumping around lots of places. You know, I have to admit, like Hidelays, I didn't. Here's the thing, like, I was a bit cheeky about this. As soon as everything was announced for Legion, before even the alpha came out, I basically said, in the guild I was in at the time, can I play Demon Hunter as my, not as the main obviously, but as my split raid out? I got in early because I knew lots of people would want to, so I got in early and I basically booked one of the places to put, because we couldn't obviously have everyone playing Demon Hunter. So I did that before I even knew what they were like. Then when I found out what they were like, I have to confess I was not a big fan. But I committed to it, so I thought, okay, I'll just do this. But I can't criticise it because it does fit. You know, for all Blizzard's talk about class fantasy, the Demon Hunter playstyle does fit their class fantasy. So, you know, there's no complaints from me on it. You sort of know what... it's not unexpected. Merry Christmas to you, Raskas. Oh, thank you, Redican. You kind of wish Demon Hunters wore mail. Yeah, I mean, even Blizzard said that in terms of gear distribution. In fact, I think they actually said they tried very hard to make them a male-wearing class. It just clearly didn't fit. Which, to be fair, it doesn't. They're basically half naked. You can't really have them as a male-wearing class. I mean, it could be argued that even hunters and shamans shouldn't be. You know, it could be argued there shouldn't be any such thing as male armor in the game. Because if you were designing a role-playing game, you wouldn't really think of hunters or shaman as being a male-wearing class either, would you? I just, like in a lot of role-playing games, you only have 3 types of armor, don't you? You usually call it light, medium, and heavy. You know, World of Warcraft having 4 armor types is actually a bit of an aberration. A bit weird. But in terms of gear distribution, certainly, there's a lot of leather wearers now. Oh God, how many have we got now? So you've got druids, rogues, monks, demon hunters. Is it just 4? That doesn't sound right somehow. No, there's another one. What am I missing? Gordon Bennett. Oh no, that's right. No, there are 4. Okay. Well, it's more than any other still, isn't it? There is plate. There is plate that makes you look half naked, but only if you're female. That's just the usual female in a role-playing game being scantily clad. I don't think there's any plate that on a male character would make you look half naked. It's not. I don't wish that Blizzard would introduce more ranged classes. I just wish they would stop introducing melee classes. The problem is, as I see it, in vanilla you had basically one ranged, melee DPS class, which is rogues. Warriors could play DPS really well. A Fury warrior played properly could be your top damage dealer, but hardly any warriors knew how to do it. We had one in our guild who did. In fact, I remember his character name, Regenovich. He was actually quite funny. He was, I can't remember where he came from. It was either Russia or one of the countries bordering Russia. And he used to get drunk every weekend. And at least once a month, in one of his drunken rages, he would quit the guild. And then he'd poke me on the next day to ask for a re-invite. But he could play it very well. But basically, you had rogues in the main for melee DPS. Then when in TBC they sorted the specs out, you all of a sudden had a bit more choice. You had rogues, you had warriors, you had paladins, you had feral druids. Even though most feral druids were more the tanky type. But you still had feral druids. And then in Wrath, they brought a new class, which lo and behold was a melee only class. So then you threw Death Knights into the mix. And every new class we've had ever since... Oh, we had enhancement shames as well, sorry. Every new class we've had since has been a melee DPS class with no ranged equivalent. And then in Legion, not only did they add another class, which, oh, surprise, surprise, is melee only, they also gave a previously ranged spec a melee option. I don't know what they're thinking sometimes. I really don't. The world end of Transmog and Argus is fairly close to it even from out. I don't recall that one then. I don't know. Gnomes are not so much an aberration as a mistake. Even in the lore of the game, they are a mistake. So they fit the fantasy as well. Actually, gnomes do fit the fantasy. They're supposed to be a hideous mistake, and they are. You asked this question before. Let's have a look. My thoughts on not just stat squish, but a level squish. Well, I've said this before quite a few times. You know, every time people are talking about stat squish, I always say I want a level squish. I think, like in Battle for Azeroth, it's going to be 120 for level cap. I think that's too much. I think for a new player coming into the game, let's say you got a friend, you go, okay, you know, come and play this game. And a player that's going to be playing WoW has probably got some experience of role-playing games. They may at this point also have experience of MMOs. To be told that they've got to get 120 levels before they can even start endgame, I think is insane. So I would certainly like to see a level squish. I don't think we need to do half as much leveling as we actually do. Even 100, it just sounds too much. It's too much. And I know there's obviously a problem in MMOs because leveling is part of it. And when you bring out a new expansion, I just wish they could come up with some way of advancing us without levels. Like, we have item level of gear. That's our real advancement. You know, it always seems to be, though, that they have to, okay, do this leveling content. I just wish that it was never a thing. Because an MMO looking long-term, it just can't work in the long term. It's a hideous, hideous situation. But Blizzard seemed to have... You could almost think there was a time a few years ago when they were thinking about this themselves. Because in... Was it Cataclysm the first time? Where you just needed 5 levels. It was, wasn't it? You went from 80 to 85 in Cataclysm. So that was almost like they were thinking, ooh, it's getting a bit heavy here. So they went 80 to 85, and then they went 85 to 90. And then WoD came along and they just abandoned it. It was almost like they went, sod it. You know, it's already too big. Bugger it. 10 levels again. Done. Actually, well, I've said exactly that, actually. So you're saying, like, each zone to be its own full scenario. You get levels when you complete the story quests. I have said exactly that. I mean, like, at the moment, for example, like I keep saying, I'm playing Star Wars The Old Republic. Now, that, until I get to level cap, I can't really say if it's brilliant. But the leveling process is a lot more enjoyable. Because you don't have to... You've got quests, and you can see the quest givers, the icons above their heads look different. So you've got your class quest, and then you've got the quest line for the world you go to, which would be like a zone in World of Warcraft. And you can just do those. You don't have to do any other things. You can just choose to ignore any other quests. And you can just go through that. And even then, to be honest, that's still more questing than you need to level up. You know, I've just done another character the last couple of days. And I'm about 50% more levels than I should be for the place I'm in the game. So, it's just, yeah... The leveling, it's too many levels and that's admittedly that's a perception thing, the number of levels, but it's still there, it's real. For a new player, it must be very daunting. And then the other thing is the time it takes to level up is too much. Yes, Lays, that is how the levels have gone. And it's going to go 110 to 120 as well. It's too much. No, they should. I think they should have quests. And I think quests are a good way of introducing you. I think when it's a role-playing game, you should be immersed into the world. I think you need to know what are the key denizens of that world, what's the general geography, any key players in it, any important NPCs, that sort of thing. You know, I think that there's certain things you should be introduced to. And questing is the ideal way to do that. But there, you know, I talked about before, I would like to see a more focused quest line that does just that. So for certain zones, there's a quest line in it that will introduce you to lots of lore. And you just follow that quest line. If you want to pick up other ones as well, you can do. But you can just follow that quest line. It'll teach you lots of things. Scenario at the end of it with a nice bit of gear, something like that. Carry on. And then it'll send you to the next zone for which... I'm not saying they do that for every zone. But, you know, I mean, maybe they do for the later expansions where there's not as many zones. But to begin with, maybe it's just certain zones where they just do that, get you through it quick. You know, if you think about, let's say you were to level up 1 to level 60 at the moment, the amount of time it will take you to get from 1 to level 60, without heirlooms this is, by the way, just normally leveling from 1 to level 60, I think that's about the same amount of time as it should take you to get to level cap. That's my view. I think that's enough time. So it should be a massively more accelerated process. And with them coming in with their scaling, that gives them the opportunity to do just that, to massively accelerate it. But when was I told this? I can't remember, it was when I was streaming. I think it might have been when I was streaming on Saturday. Someone actually said that on the PTR at the moment, that it's actually taking you longer to level. That's just madness. That's mental. It should take you less time. I know if they didn't change anything, it would take more time, because obviously with scaling, that means you're no longer beating up on weak green mobs, because that's the part of the problem when you're doing content that's just too easy. Is the problem the time that takes, or that it's incredibly boring at the moment? It's the time, because because you've got to think about what's at the moment, here and now, what is going to attract a new player into World of Warcraft. Now, I don't know what the reason is for a lot of players playing Warcraft is, but it would not surprise me if there's a significant number coming on the advice of friends. So if they're coming on the advice of friends, they will want to play with those friends. And that basically means endgame. So those players are going to be motivated to get up to that point. And, you know, and if it seems like it's just going to take too long to do that, then that's pretty bad. Also, when you look at, I mean, let me have a quick look here. So lots of the content you're looking at that Blizzard push, oh, this is coming up and this is coming up. Oh, and here's what's coming up in the next patch. Almost all of that content is for people at level cap. Actually, the next patch that's coming out is probably one of the very few patches there's been for some years where that's not the case. The next patch, a lot of it is stuff actually for people who are leveling because they've got the scaling. But actually, I don't... Maybe allied races, or maybe some allied races. The other thing is also creating a new character. Because I know what Blizzard would say. Blizzard would say, okay, well, if there's a new player and they're joining because of joining friends, they get their character boost with the game. The problem with that is if they make it, you know, if they decide they don't actually like that class, and I know you've got a try it thing, but you don't get to try it for long enough. It can take you a good month to realise you don't like the class. And then you've stuck with it. So you've got to level a new character then. It's just too long. So the free boost is for the purpose of being able to play with friends, but it only works if you know what class you want to play, and how can you do that as a new player? And the other thing is, the character boost isn't all it's cracked up to be, because you get all your abilities all at once. Well, that's more difficult. I think leveling is quite good for letting people learn an ability at a time. Gaz, I think I agree that Blizzard does market the game towards existing players, but the problem is when you market it entirely towards existing players, you are accepting that you are going to get ever-reducing numbers of people playing the game. Because you can never increase that pool of players, you can only lose players. And you will lose players, even if you do things well. Because some people will just stop playing for, you know, because something else comes along that's just better or more modern, or because domestic life gets in the way, or some other reason. But the trial for me, just trying it out for a bit, is better than nothing. But you can't judge a class just playing it for a little bit. You know, you need to get stuck. You also, it depends on the content you want to do as well. But whatever the content is you ultimately want to do in endgame, you need to get stuck into it to decide. I mean, a new player might not even know what role they want to play, let alone what class. You know. What if they think they'd quite like to play a DPS, so they choose a class that's got access to 3 DPS specs, they choose a rogue or something like that, so they can try out different play styles. If there's one they don't like, it's okay, there's 2 more. And then they decide they'd like to do a bit of tanking. Well, they're a bit stuck. Sorry. Do another class that and got tanking available to it. So I think they should focus on the new player thing. I did think that scaling zones might have been... I mean, it might not be. Scaling zones, you could say, is equally useful to existing players that just want to create more characters. But it is also something that could be a bit of a focus towards newer players. But they should put more effort into it. And I think they could just do a main quest line that runs runs on rails all the way through. Because the other problem I have with it is, I mean, the Cataclysm 1 to 60 content was a complete shambles, an absolute shambles, because that's got players. First of all, it's anachronistic, and then it's got players going on. Oh, Deathwing, as they cannot, I'm sure, cannot help but think that Deathwing must be a major bad guy in the game. Well, not from our point of view, he's dead. Gone. And they'll never see him dead and gone. Because that's raid content. They'll never do it. They'll just get to level 85 and then they'll start going to Pandaland. And it'll be like, okay, the Deathwing theme seems to have dried up a bit here. What's going on? In fact, the Deathwing theme dries up before then, because what they'll do is they'll get to 60, they'll go to either now, I suppose, with the scaling, Northrend or Outland, and there'll not be really much there. I suppose if they go to Outland, Blades Edge Mountains, there'll be a bit of a Deathwing theme, a little bit, if they look hard enough for it. And then they'll finish that, they'll come back to Cataclysm at some point, Deathwing kicks off again. But, you know, and then it'll just end forever. Complete mess. And I don't think the leveling can teach people about the game anymore because it's too disjointed. So I would quite like to see a major storyline that will take you all the way up to level cap in a reasonable amount of time. Just follow this storyline and it will show you all the different aspects of lore. So you'll be fully attuned with the game by the time you get there. Well, I don't know that being too easy is a big problem when you're leveling. I mean, that's a matter of debate, that one. But leveling and endgame are different games, certainly. The thing is, though, the killing mobs being difficult, eventually it does get more difficult because eventually you'll get to the latest contents leveling. And then you can start to learn. You can start to fine-tune your skills with the class then, I think. I don't, even in vanilla, to be fair, Action Man, you didn't have to use your full toolkit to win. That's the thing. Because there's no doubt about it that in vanilla leveling, you did have to think a bit carefully. You couldn't just run into a group of mobs because you would get smashed. Whereas there was plenty of things that I didn't use while leveling. And I didn't even know how to. One of my more, well, almost embarrassing, I actually got away with it completely. When I got to level cap, I didn't even know how to use judgment. I didn't actually understand the spell. Because with me, because it's quite embarrassing. But you got judgment fairly low level. You had the way it used to work in vanilla is you had seals. You applied a seal, the seal would last for 30 seconds. And it had a certain effect. So you would get the benefit of that seal. It was a buff. But there was a secondary thing with it as well. But because I didn't spend a lot of time reading the tooltip, because I'm a bloke, it's the same thing when I get a new machine. I don't read the instructions. That would be silly. I just press buttons till it does something. And so I had much the same attitude to spells. I didn't read them properly. So I remember getting judgment. And I remember going to a mob and using judgment, and my seal buff disappeared. And it appeared on my target. Now, what I now know is when you judge, there's a secondary effect of the seal. When you judge, it applies that secondary effect to the target. Which usually, but not always, but usually was to debuff the target. But I didn't see that. I saw the same icon that was a buff for me appearing on my target. So I thought, what the bloody hell is the point of this ability? It's buffing my target, the thing that's trying to kill me. So it's not only removed my buff, it's applied the buff to my enemy. At which point I took it off my action bar and never touched it again. So then I remember at level cap getting in, and this was the case for quite some time. And I got into like a pug of some kind, and someone was talking about buffing, judging something. He said, "Can you judge whatever it was, wisdom or light on this thing?" Probably wisdom. And at the time, I didn't actually acknowledge my stupidity, because if I'd have gone, "Don't be stupid, why would I want to do that?" then it would have been embarrassing. So what I actually did is I thought, and I read, at that point, I read the tooltip, and I went, okay, then I did it. So I actually got away without the embarrassing incident, but nonetheless, I'd got all the way to there, thinking that judgment was a really pointless ability to have. But, so yeah, even in vanilla, which has never been a more difficult leveling process, you didn't have to use all your abilities. Annoying thing about vanilla leveling is having to stop and eat and drink so much. Not as a paladin, just auto-attack things. There wasn't much else you could do anyway, because if you tried... I mean, obviously I didn't use judgment, that's already been established. But even if I had, I'd have burnt through my mana too quickly anyway. So basically, seal of command, auto-attack, job done. Well, this was it, because there is actually a video I'm planning on doing. The thing is, I haven't put out many videos recently, well, in the last few days specifically, because no one's basically going to watch them. During the Christmas week, you get... Oh my God. You get a whatchamacallit, what's it? What should I say? You get a massive drop in the number of people watching YouTube. It's not just my channel as well, by the way. I know other YouTubers say the same thing. I'm just trying to have a look now. So, like, if I've got ideas for videos, although I may do some this week, I need to make them up. I don't really want to upload too many of them this week, apart from the usual like series ones I'm doing at the moment, because yeah, they're not going to get watched. But there is one I'm going to be doing that when these classics WoW servers come out, and we're talking about vanilla is vanilla, there are at least 5 ways in which it's not going to be and it can't be. Impossible to be. And one of the ways is lag, because lag was a significant effect that did not bother me at all as a paladin. Because if I'm hitting a mob, as long as that mob didn't move, once I'd got into melee range of it and I was hitting it, as long as it didn't bugger off, then it was fine. If I lagged, it was okay. I just waited for the lag to stop and I would loot the thing and then carry on to the next one. You just think Blizz have went too far in one direction. WoW is increasingly Diablo-like, pounding through scores of mobs. I don't know about the link with Diablo. Certainly, yes, they have moved away, because I distinctly remember it in vanilla. I don't remember if it was the same in TBC, though. Isn't that weird sometimes? I can remember things distinctly from vanilla and not always from another time. But anyway, there were times in vanilla, I remember particularly near... bugger. Is it Darkshire? There was some Worgen, basically, and there was a quest where you had to, like, kill so many of them, 9, 12, something like that. And... CRT monitors, yeah. There was... Like, the way you could kill your quota is some Worgen would wander around in 1s and 2s in a patrol route. Some of them, there'd be, like, a whole group of them around a campfire or something. So if you were in a group, you could take on the big whole load of them. But if you were on your own, you couldn't, you would die. So you had to carefully pick off the ones that were patrolling. And it would take you longer. Whereas now, you don't. You would go, oh, great, there's a whole group of them over there. I'll just run into that lot and AoE them all down. I also remember even in raids there was a similar thing. I remember in raids, usually when you first went into a raid and it was new and there was a big group of mobs, you would have to pull them out and kill them one at a time. You'd have focus targets and you'd focus one down at a time. And then eventually when your gear got good enough, then you could AoE them all down. And it was always seen as a big moment when you could AoE a pack down. Whereas now, if we go into a raid for the very first time on the first week of release, if there's a group of mobs and trash, you're going to AoE them. Every single time you will AoE them all down. Yeah, in Duskwood. It was just behind the main town there, which I think was called Dark something. Why can't I remember the name of the bloody place? Is it Darkshire? Sounds right. But I don't know. Yeah, it is Darkshire. Thank you. I thought my brain was sort of, there was a part of my brain going, that doesn't sound right. But then the rest of my brain was going, no, it does. But yeah, so there's, yeah. But there was lots of zones where there was a similar sort of thing. It's just that one sticks in my head quite a lot. Because I probably sticks in my head because it was the first time when I tried to take on the group. That's when I learnt that you pick them off. You pick off the patrolling ones. Disconnect was a prominent feature the first week of Antorus. Well, it's not quite the same thing as frequent lag. It was just the nature of broadband and the quality of computers back then. I mean, there were still people playing on like a 486 when Pentiums were much more common. And they could still do it. The Murloc camp in Redridge. Yeah, I didn't like Redridge much. I remember the Murloc camp, though. I know what you're talking about there. But I really didn't like... Redridge, for me, was just where I went between, like, doing most of Duskwood, which I did like. That was my favourite zone. And... I do remember the Pentium 2. Pentium 2s were what we had. That was when I was at university. And I remember when the library got some Pentium 2s in. But yeah, Redridge, basically, it's just what I did until I was about level 20-ish. And then I would disappear off to wetlands. But certainly, you know, that sort of leveling, that sort of having to... But then again, if they introduced more of that, where you have to think about it and you can't just run into a group of mobs to take them down, if they went back to that, they would, again, have to significantly reduce the amount of time it took for you to level up. Because otherwise, it would just... Or they'd have to do something to compensate. Because it already takes too long to level. If you're going to... I'm talking about level from level 1. And if they did that again, then that would take even longer and much more. It wouldn't even just take double the time. It'd take much more than double the time. So, I mean, it'd encourage more people to group up, you could argue. I liked Westfall, yeah, as it was, not as it is now. I think the first time I ever saw a mob with a skull where its level should be was when I went from Wetlands north into Arathi Highlands, I think it is. I'd heard about the Cataclysm dungeons at the start of the expansion, and a lot of people saying they were too difficult. But that was more about the dungeons than the leveling. The leveling was still straight. Even though I wasn't there at the start of the expansion, I was there. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I still leveled it up, and that was not difficult. Oh, well, the problem with Dead Mines was getting into the instance. It took you... you could go around in circles trying to find the instance entrance in Dead Mines. Hi, Man of War. Well, Winnie, the whatever it was, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't playing at the time. But it seems to me like all the people who complained about Casa Dungeons being too difficult got their way. Because the dungeons that came through halfway through the expansion, that trio of Thrall-infused dungeons, were extremely easy. And then Mop, the expansion after it, were beyond a joke. That's why this Mop time walking next week is actually the most straightforward time walk, because those dungeons were just made to be blasted through without having to think. Which is very nice when you're just randomly queuing up with people you don't know. You don't want it to be too tricky then. On my realm. What, Astral Norub? Oh, no. Oh, Ravenholt, no. I was on, well, I was on Asjol Nerub at that time. That's the first realm I was on. And where I returned to during TBC. And was still there when I came back. Defias Brotherhood, I see. I'm fine with if mobs are more difficult when leveling. It's just that the main problem I have with leveling is, from my point of view, it takes too long, and there's a perception thing. There's too many levels that just is worrisome to a new player. So if they do anything that's going to increase the amount of time it takes to do, let's say, a particular quest, if they make mobs more difficult, or where you can't just running an AoE load down, by definition it's going to take you a lot longer to do quests, then they need to reduce the number of them that you need to do to level up. Which is fine, that's okay, because then that's like arguing that you're going to get better quality leveling over quantity. Well, the scaling changes to do with it, but Just levelling in general is what we're talking about. Someone happened to say on Saturday, which was quite disconcerting, that it's going to take longer to level up when it should be quicker. It's just, for me, levelling just takes too long. It's an excessive amount of time when the vast majority of people who are going to play the game want to get to level cap. And it also doesn't really teach you anything either. So it's low quality, the leveling experience. When I compare it to other MMOs, it's low quality and takes too long. I can think of no redeeming features with leveling. And them introducing the zone scaling, it improves what is already a bad experience. It just makes it less bad, but it'll still be a bad experience. And it doesn't matter whether it's a current player who just wants to roll another character or a new player who has no idea about the game. But again, you know, I don't think they will ever do it, because I think again, Blizzard, when they do something and then it doesn't work out, they seem to sort of like be a case of once bitten, twice shy. So they view the work they did on leveling with Cataclysm, like the 1 to 60 content, as it didn't pan out. Well, obviously it didn't pan out. It was a stupid idea from the start. So they will use that as evidence. Oh, we shouldn't do anything. We shouldn't do anything to improve the leveling experience again. Which is the wrong way to look at it. Because I don't think this zone scaling would have taken very much work. I think it was quite a... I mean, I can't say for certain, but I imagine it's not... If it took that much effort, I got the impression it's something that would be coming for the next expansion and not right now. But yeah, if I think about the MMOs that I have played, the way leveling is in World of Warcraft, I would rate as probably the second. I would say Lord of the Rings Online is still worse. Even though Lord of the Rings Online has been improved itself, but on balance it's still worse. Well, that is indeed how society wants it. Yeah, the way society is now, they want everything this second and don't want to earn it. There are a lot of people like that, yeah. Which is why, of course, we have the different modes of raiding. We have 4 different difficulties of raiding to cater for all the different people. Do I think all content should be made to teach people to be better and push them towards the next tier of content? Not all content, no. I think that the end game content should encourage people to want to do the hardest mode of whatever content they want to do. So I would say there's 3 types. At the moment, there's 3 types of end game content. I would like there to be 4. But I think there's 3. I think there's PvP, and I think there's dungeons, and I think there's raids. Now, the 4th one I would like would be like what you might call artisanship, which you can't do it through professions. Blizzard tried to make in Legion people who want to do as their endgame profession mastery as the thing, but that doesn't work. That's a silly idea. But, you know, solo content, worthwhile solo content, which means, of course, beating the drum yet again of player housing and an expanded cosmetic system for people who are interested in that. But whatever is your mode of content, whether it's PvP, dungeons or raiding, I think that whenever you do the like entry points to it, like whether it be LFR or just signing up for heroic dungeons or just doing, you know, battlegrounds, non-rated battlegrounds, all of that content should encourage you to want to make a step up to the next level. And also the game should do more to encourage you to get involved in a guild, because a lot of the problems people have in accessing these bits of content, ultimately when it comes down to it, their problems are around pugging them. But people shouldn't pug that content. When it gets above a certain level, you shouldn't be trying to pug it. You should be trying to get into a guild of players who want to do it as well, and do it with those players, where you're all invested in helping each other out. To rejuvenate players, they should make the Bronze Dragon Chromie to allow you to quest in the old Azeroth. I don't know about everyone else, but I would totally... well, I wish they'd never got rid of the original quests in vanilla. They should have left them alone. Like, I also don't like the fact that they changed the dungeons. Like, Scholarmancer was my favourite dungeon, and then it's not there anymore. You know, they've monkeyed about with old dungeons. They shouldn't do that. If they want to go, oh, well, after the passage of time, this place has changed, that's fine. They should have done a different Scholarmancer, like they did with Karazhan. Original Karazhan is still there, because people would have lost their shit if Blizzard have replaced Karazhan with this dungeon we've got now. So what did they do? They just did an updated Karazhan with a different entry point. They should have done the same thing with Scholarmancer. They should have done the same thing with Upper Blackrock Spire. What else have they pissed about with? Can't even remember. Is that it? Not sure. But that's what they should have done, at least with those two. I don't know, Gaz, why Blizzard don't want to focus more on cosmetic rewards either. They're more long-lasting. The problem is, like, you look at a raid, and it doesn't matter about this Titan forging bollocks or anything like that. A raid has a limited period of time where lots of people are going to want to run it. All right, and even if you manage to extend that across an entire expansion, that's still it. The only thing... Oh, yeah, Deadmine's winning. That's it as well. Thank you. Yeah, they did. Oh, God, yeah. That's why I couldn't remember it. My brain has tried to block access to it because it's got that retarded comic CSI crap in it, hasn't it? Oh, and Scarlet Monastery as well. Yeah, I knew there were more. Possibly I wasn't that bothered about Scarlet Monastery in the first place, and the Scarlet Library. And they've got rid of the Scarlet Armory and the Graveyard, which I'm not happy about either. Anyway, yeah, so they've done it with lots of dungeons. But, yeah, the raids, all those raids will be in the next expansion is stuff for people to go back and solo for transmog. And once they've got that transmog, that's it. Whereas when you bring in, and that's for cosmetic purposes as well, the long-term use of any content they bring into this game is for cosmetic purposes. So I don't know why they don't just embrace it. If they want us going out into the world, what better way than to have content in there that's just for cosmetic purposes, which lasts forever. The cosmetic rewards last forever. But yeah, I can't bear Deadmines anymore. Because that was my first ever dungeon, so I quite liked that dungeon. And again, I've got no issue with them doing an updated version, you know, to show the passage of time. But it shouldn't get rid of the previous version. So that Deadmines was done in Cataclysm, wasn't it? So it should have been that is like a level 85 dungeon, the new Deadmines, but the original Deadmines for around about level 17, 18-ish was still there as it used to be, with Edwin Van Cleef at the end of it, not Cookie. No, Edwin's gone. Exactly. We fight a cauldron instead. Cookie used to be on the level below, and you used to just beat him up so you could get a mace in the shape of a rolling pin. Or a wand in the shape of a spoon if you're a caster. but I quite liked the mace in the shape of a rolling pin, which you don't seem to be able to get anymore. And unfortunately, obviously, I never kept a copy of it because it was just a green item, and transmog didn't come in for years. Because I kept that for quite a long time because I used to carry around one of every weapon that I could use for weapon skilling purposes. So when I got a new level, I would swap around what weapons I used just to keep up my weapon level on them. For everything apart from pole arms, because I didn't get my first pole arm for ages. So that was always a little bit behind. And I didn't like axes at all. In fact, I remember when I got Severance, I had to skill my weapon up for Severance. That was from Nax. So I'd got all the way to Nax without actually having full weapon skill for 200 axes. But as a human, you sort of tended to favour swords and maces anyway. She has a racial bonus on those with weapon skill. Because that was one racial they got rid of. I don't know why they don't tone down the racial benefits we get in game. Because they got rid of the ones where we got bonuses to certain weapons. Presumably because it encourages you as a particular race to use a particular type of weapon, or if you wanted to use a particular type of weapon, to roll the race that could use it. Do I think they can write a believable story for us to get rid of our artifacts? Well, it's already sort of been revealed. If you'd care to... If you want to sort of find out how we get rid of them, we already know. And do I think it's believable? No, I think it's a load of crap. But we already know the reason why. I'm not going to say here because spoilers. But it's already... the information, or enough information, should we say, has been data mined already. Well, we've got dialogue data mined that basically tells us to do it. So, although... presumably there'll be a cutscene with it, maybe, sort of. Obviously that won't be data mined, but we've data mined the text-based dialogue that goes with it. And yes, you're quite right. Some of the artifacts you can well imagine certain classes would be reluctant to sacrifice. And a warlock is an excellent example of a class that would be reluctant to sacrifice their source of power. You know, paladins arguably can be guilted into doing it. Paladins can be guilted into sacrificing it. But not, you know, some like warlocks, you certainly wouldn't expect that. You find it humorous that somehow the random weapons you get in next expansion are going to be better. Yeah, from a storyline perspective, there are some things you just have to not think about. To be fair, in an MMO, you know, I think that happens quite a bit. But that's just the way it is. Well, technically, it won't be better than the Ashbringer. You know, whatever weapons we get may hit harder than our artifact weapon. But they won't be better because our artifact weapons gave us 7 new abilities, which about 7, something like 7. What have we got? What is it? I'm going to assume it's the same for every class. I may be wrong there. So for Ret Paladins, the new abilities we got Ashes to Ashes, Divine Tempest, thingy, the Mimic thing. I can't remember what it's called even for Templar's Verdict. The Divine Storm doing healing. Will of the Ashbringer breaks us out of stuns. The thing that means that... Echo the High Lord, yeah, that's it. The thing that means that our judgment can spread. We like knock things on the head and it spreads our judgment around. It is 7. I'm trying to think what it is now. It's gone completely out of my head. Oh yeah, getting a strength bonus from having our Greater Blessings active. So there's like, unless I'm missing one out, that's 7 completely new abilities. Not buffs to abilities we already have, but 7 completely new abilities. The next weapon we get won't have anything like that. So from that point of view, it'll still be better because it gave us new abilities. And there's no way they're going to roll all those into baseline. They may give us one of them. Oh no, 8, because we've got our actual artifact ability itself, Wake of Ashes as well. Although you could argue Ashes to Ashes because it just buffs. Is it? It's a totally separate ability. It maybe. Well, 8. We'll say 8 anyway. Hell with it. Some classes will have an easier time. The Rose King Slayers are dumb. Yeah, I suppose some will. I will notice. Although rogues, like subtlety rogues, can you imagine how many subtlety rogues are going to start falling from, dying from fall damage once they get rid of theirs? It's going to be carnage, be like lemmings. The Azerite armor certainly will provide abilities like that. That's the whole point of them, but it will be a changing because we're supposed to be able to choose which ones we want to use. Like there's some choice, and that choice they say is going to persist throughout the expansion, which does suggest, as people already suggested, that maybe that means carrying around several sets of this bloody stuff so that we can actually, you know, change between 2 or 3 different types, maybe on a fight by fight basis. But again, details. I mean, some details haven't even been decided yet, so a bit difficult to say for certain. Well, they don't have to bake in Wake of Ashes. They could do what they did at BlizzCon, although I don't. Well, I would hope they won't, which is to just make it a talent. They could do that. I mean, I don't see the fact that it was a talent at BlizzCon as evidence that they're going to, because that's just them doing something quickly. But, you know, I also wouldn't rule it out. But I don't know how many classes have abilities from their artifact that they feel is an integral part of their rotation. I mean, Wake of Ashes is. Unless they change other things. I suppose if you get rid of Crusade, it's less so. But it is still really good, even without Crusade. Not so much just for the HP generation. The fact that it's an AoE and an AoE dot with Ashes to Ashes means it's useful for when you've got ads that suddenly pop up out of nowhere and have to be DPS down quickly. They said they aren't making any major class changes. Well, I mean, there's a class design team, and obviously that class design team will have to be occupied with the job of class design. So the amount of work they will be doing will surely be as much work as they've ever done. It's just that they're not going to, what they're saying is they're not going to completely tear down the classes from Legion and rebuild them. There will still have to be changes. And there's still a team of people who will deal with those. With Celestial on gone, it all depends on, I suppose, who's going to take charge of that team. Because it's all right them keep going on about, oh, it's a team effort, stuff like that. Well, of course it is. But a team still has a leader who gets to yay or nay certain things. Because ultimately, when that team disagrees on something, there has to be one person who basically goes, no, we're going to do it this way. Otherwise, that argument would go on forever. For Mythic Plus, I wouldn't worry too much about the AoE stun, because that only works against undead and demons. I'd be very surprised if there's going to be a significant number of undead or demons in the next expansion. I mean, undead and demons will still exist. They still exist. But they're not going to be a big enemy for a little while, if they ever are again. He now has a game that suits his playing on his iPad. Well, I think his ideal sort of game would be one where, you know, he gets to spend... Because he gets to spend ages dyeing the hair of his characters. Because that's still all he tweets about, really. If you ever sort of see him on Twitter, almost all of his tweets are related in some way to turning people's hair blue. That's his vocation in life. He just wants to be a hairdresser. I don't know why he doesn't just do it. Open up his own salon. The cleverest thing he ever did, in my view, was BlizzCon before last, when he actually opened up a salon at BlizzCon for doing it, and he called it the Celeste Salon. That was the cleverest thing he's ever come up with, as far as I know. So that's his great motivation. I don't know why he doesn't just feed it. This whole Zandalar place seems to have a lot. Yes, Zandalar, I suppose, would have a certain amount of undead in it. And, of course, there's going to be Zandalar dungeons, so there might be some undead. Yeah, that is true. I don't think it matters, with Ian being lead game designer playing at a high level. I don't think you need someone who plays it at a high level. Like, whoever you have in charge of something, they can't possibly experience all aspects of the game because they don't have time. So all you need is someone who understands what they have a good insight into and what they don't. And when they don't, they simply have to understand who they should take advice from. That's really the trick of leadership there. They just need to know whose advice to trust. I mean, it could be argued a big downside to Ian becoming so senior is that he was lost as an encounter designer, for which he was regarded as being very good. Yes, SSO MMO, certain abilities work on certain targets. Wake of Ashes should always stun, blah, blah. Exorcism changed quite a lot. Exorcism used to... It went through a whole thing. It used to only work on undead and demons. Then they changed it so it worked on anything, but would crit, or guaranteed crit, on undead and demons. Then there was a thing... I don't even remember what order all this went in, by the way. Then there was a thing where it would stun undead and demons. And then it was just a thing. I think the argument is, if you've got something that does extra damage against a particular type of target, admittedly the stun is not that, then you create a problem, because if you have a whole tier of that type of target, obviously that ability is going to be quite powerful. Then on the next tier, when you have none of them, all of a sudden it becomes too weak. And it's almost like you'd have to keep having a tuning lever to move up or down, dependent on whether there's things in that tier with that thing or not. And let's say you have a tier where there's some of it and not on others, it's all very messy. I mean, I admit that it's good roleplay to have abilities that are more effective against certain types of target, but it's hell on balance. What you're thinking of was Holy Wrath. Before they tainted the name of Holy Wrath with the god-awful excuse for a talent that we have at the moment, which is going to crawl out of the building any time now. That was Holy Wrath. And it was a prot ability for a bit. It used to be, obviously, just a paladin ability. And yeah, that did used to stun. It wasn't just undead. You could have it, or was there a glyph that made it stun elementals sometimes as well? I can't remember. But yeah, that used to be an AoE thing that affected undead. And then they turned it into a meme talent that no one takes because, you know, it's just bad. Oh, apparently that bug that stops you getting the hearth station has been fixed, so you don't have to create a new character anymore. Oh, well, that's good news. I might have to go and see if that's available then. Although I still need to get my Horde goodies. Oh, hang on a minute. So how did you get it yesterday then? Because I was under the... I certainly didn't get it. And I was under the impression it was a thing that if you were on a character that had done a previous Winter Veil, that it wouldn't work because of some ID issue. Or did you get it on a character that hadn't done Winter Veil before? Well, the thing about class fantasy is it was just come up as a phrase to shut people up when they couldn't be bothered to argue. In terms of actual class fantasy, it's quite easy to make. They have any number of ways in which you can have what do you call it? You can have different classes feeling different. You know, I don't think there was ever an issue with classes feeling the same. You can argue there was some issues with some specs feeling the same within classes, like hunters, but who cares? The reason is they just have this fixation about giving us unique sets of abilities. But the problem with that is that there's going to be some encounters, particularly in raids, but dungeons it can happen as well, where you're going to value certain classes much more than others, and some classes potentially going to either be useless or even poisonous to have on a particular encounter. All in the sake of flavour. I mean, the latest one was, of course, Mythic Imonar, which you can get away with, but you just got, as a Retribution Paladin on that fight, you've got to be extremely lively on your feet. Because when you get the, God, what's it called? The sleep canister thing. You've got to shift your arse out of melee range pretty bloody quickly. Because your Will of the Ashbringer breaks you out of it. You haven't got time to tell people to shift their arse. But, so that's an ability that is actually a problem on that fight. Your class fantasy is having the bubble of passive that you get all the time. I don't think that would be fair. We used to have a passive, effectively a passive. It was like an active mitigation. I think we were the only DPS in Warlords of Draenor that had active mitigation, because you had a glyph which you would have equipped all the time, which meant that your Templar's Verdicts gave you a damage absorb. And it was easy to maintain basically almost 100% of the time, as long as you were in combat and could hit stuff. How do I feel about reducing the number of specs in the game? I would be very much in favour, but I don't think they can do it. It doesn't matter. I don't think there's a single spec in the game that wouldn't cause a bit of a backlash if they were to actually remove it. Well, if you're talking about the auras that different classes are going to get, it hasn't been worked out how they're going to work yet. I certainly think they're going to rethink the way that some of them are auras and some of them are on-use abilities. That is not going to work. They didn't really remove survival. They just... You could say the same about them getting rid of combat rogue. You know, they just changed it. But we'll be talking about actually just dropping a spec completely. I don't see why any class needs multiple specs of the same role. If I were designing like World of Warcraft and I had carte blanche to do whatever I wanted, which I wouldn't, so I can say what I want. They are I would just get rid of everything. Like, if you're a DPS class, then there is just one spec you have. Simple as that. So there'd be rogues. There wouldn't be different specs of rogue. There would just be rogues. Maybe you change how certain abilities work depending on what you're equipped with. So maybe if you've got 2 swords equipped, then maybe certain abilities do slightly different things. And if you've got daggers, they do, again, slightly different things. Maybe you change up the playstyle like that. So a different weapon equipped changes how the abilities work. But in terms of actively changing from one spec to another, I wouldn't have any of that. Apart from for roles. My opinion on the next class that will come to WoW. I hope none. I hope there will be no new classes. I do not think we can accommodate anymore. Even if it was a pure ranged DPS class. Even if it was that. Even if they brought in necromancers, say, and they thought of a cunning way to introduce necromancers, it's too many. Okay, it's just too many. Well, it doesn't matter how similar they are, though, in terms of combat and outlaw, more similar than old and new survival. The fact is they didn't delete a spec from the class. I think because they changed the way how things play lots of times. Like, there's lots of classes play very differently to the way they used to. And Retribution Paladin is not, or any of the specs of Paladin are nothing like the way they used to play in vanilla. So they changed them quite a lot. But deleting it completely is where they would be in trouble. You think they could remove Arcane? I'm not sure. I'm not sure they could. Because apart from anything else, Arcane Blast is the most iconic mage ability, I would say. Even though it doesn't get used as much now. But I don't think, I mean, you know, it's not even one of these things where I'd even think, they might not even see it as a problem. I think Blizzard and I fundamentally disagree on the philosophy of class design. So I don't think it's even something they see as a problem, having too many specs in the game. But there's too many classes in the game, given that classes are going to have at least 2 specs. And what would be the other specs? So if they brought in a new class, and let's say it was just, let's say they brought in a necromancer, and let's say, buoyed on by their success with demon hunters, which only had 2 specs, they decided to do the same thing here. And maybe they brought in a necromancer that had a ranged DPS and a healer option, which is possible. That would make, you know, that would be okay from a gameplay point of view. And let's say they could come up with, you know, unique play system, which is a big ask at this point with already 12. It's still adding too many classes into the mix. Blaze, yeah, well, certainly if they change the talent system, then if they wanted to get rid of lots of different specs for each class, then a change to the talent system would facilitate that. I'm not saying go back to the original system of talents, but maybe a different way of doing it. So they could indeed change the, they could indeed change the talents system to replace specs. Could they ever make a class that uses their own health as a resource for their spells? I don't think that would be sensible. They could, of course they could. Like Warlocks is the closest to it with life tap. It's a bit dodgy though. The problem is, what you're basically saying is, in a situation like that, if they get low on health, and if it's their own, if that is their resource, their own health is their resource, that stops them doing anything at certain part. Particularly in PvP, that would be problematic as well. So I don't think it would be sensible to do that. as their own resource, it would be hideous. Because if they ran out of it, or even got low, like in PvP, it would be a nightmare. Even if they buffed their overall health pool to try and compensate, you still get to a position where... I don't play League of Legends, but, you know, you still get to a situation where... maybe a better way... Well, let's say it was a pet class and they used their pet's health as a resource. And if their pet died, they'd have to, like, you know, resurrect it. But it wouldn't resurrect with full health. So it would resurrect with something like, I don't know, 20% health. And maybe it just... There's certain things you do to replenish it. Maybe there's some abilities you have that don't have a resource cost, but it increases the health of your pet. And you use because that could be a necromancer thing, couldn't it? That you draw your siphoning health away, a bit like Gul'dan in the film, where he takes life force from some things and turns it into fel energy. That sort of thing you might be able to do. So the pet exists, therefore, as like a battery to power their stuff. And you've got some abilities that use that health as a resource, and some others that don't have a cost or on a timer, or some weak abilities, obviously, that generate health to that add. So, you know, you could come up with a situation like that, which would work equally as a healer spec as well, drawing the health from your gimp and transferring it to the people you're healing. So you could, but not from your own health. I don't think that would work. The diversity is only like a problem. I don't think that's the insoluble bit. I think the insoluble bit is 13 classes. You know, when you've got mythic raiding only allows 20 people in the entire raid, it's already pretty bad that we've got as many as 12 classes. Increasing the number of classes, I think, just makes it worse. And they absolutely 100% cannot afford to put any more melee classes in the game. It wouldn't even matter if they brought out a class that had a melee and a ranged option. They cannot bring out any more melee at all. There's already too many. It's already too many. Yeah, there's lots of things you could do with the, you know, the concept of, say, of using pet's health to draw it in, you know. So I could see a necromancer class. I mean, that's the one I've sort of thought about before. It's just the problem is, the reason I say that is because there were necromancers in Warcraft 1, but it could be argued that what necromancers were, although there's no class like necromancers in the game now, it could be argued that an awful lot of what they were has been baked into warlocks and death knights, sorry, now. There should be another ranged physical class. Well, I thought they could have had demon hunters have a ranged spec. I saw no reason why there couldn't have been a ranged demon hunter option. Action Man, yeah, discipline priest with battle healer. Like, you know, I would quite like to see paladins get a spec that's that. Tinkers. I think the closest we have to like Tinker class is survival hunters with traps, obviously. I mean, what would these things be armed with? A spanner? No, no, no. Will you stop cheating my system? Gnomes are banned here. You want your old warlock meta from back for demo for next X-Pack. The problem is that warlocks themselves sacrifice things in game for real. Because every time Blizzard come up with a new class, it seems to me that warlocks probably break out in a bit of a sweat. Because first of all, you had Death Knights who nicked warlock type abilities. And then obviously monks, okay, passed them by. And then demon hunters as well. nicking stuff that had previously been iconic for Warlocks. So again, you can imagine if Blizzard said, oh, we're introducing a new class, Necromancers. All the Warlocks in the world will go, hang on a minute, what are we going to be losing now? I mean, Death Knights, I thought Death Knights were going to get a range spec. When I first saw, like, the announcement for Wrath of the Lich King at BlizzCon, and there was this scene with Death Knights from, it seemed to me, some distance, casting Death and Decay and stuff like that and sending, like, ghouls in. I thought there was going to be a range spec where they were casters. That's what I thought. I thought one of the Death Knight specs would be, like a caster that like summoned in raised ghouls and sent them in, not just like Army of the Dead and once every 10-minute thing, but actually actively did that. A bit like Warlocks, I suppose. With is it Destruction Warlocks that summon all the imps? I can't remember. Something like that. And then casting Death and Decay and Death Coil from afar, all that sort of thing. I thought that's what was, but it wasn't. It was just pure melee. So Death Knights could have easily had a range spec. Demon Hunters could have easily had a range spec. They just, I don't know. I don't know what goes through their head at these meetings when they're deciding what this class should be like. I cannot believe that nobody said that the nature of the game penalises melee DPS, so why is it that we have more melee DPS than ranged DPS? And then when they bring out new classes, they only allow them to be melee. I don't get it. It's like a sort of stupidity. But they can't be stupid people, because stupid people couldn't make this game. I don't get it. Sometimes I think it must be me. Could they remake a spec to go from melee to range? They've made a spec go from range to melee in terms of survival hunters, so I have no doubts at all that they could do the reverse process. They could make Unholy Death Knights ranged, certainly. What did I think about DK's being DPS a tank in every spec in Wrath? Well, they all the way, because I played it through beta as well. And it was changing like mad all the way through beta. And then, yeah, at the start, it was just mad. But the problem is I stopped playing at the end of Tier 7. So at the point I was sort of playing it, you had quite a lot of people thinking they could do DPS as Blood. Like, Blood seemed to be... Because there was a point in beta where Blood looked like being the main PvE DPS spec. But I don't... And all of the DKs, because we had 3 DKs, including fucking Gnome, in our guild, and they all went Blood, which I thought was a bit funny. I mean, they did okay with it. The problem was, this annoyed the hell out of me, is they kept giving Hysteria, which was a buff you could apply that increased someone's physical damage, I think. They kept giving that to our warrior instead of me, which, okay, fair enough, they do more physical damage than I do. The problem was that we used to fight it out for who got top DPS on most fights in Naxxramas. And when they beat me by a small amount, it's like, ooh, that's just because of Hysteria. But anyway, yeah, so then it went from that. And Frost was like a dual-wield tanky type spec, which is a bit mental. And then it went through, because I'd stopped playing then, but I had a friend of mine who played Death Knight. And he there was like dual wielding Unholy DKs doing very good DPS. It all just, basically they just didn't have it ready for the expansion launch. They couldn't decide on what to do with it all. Like, I would have just come up with a tanking spec, a melee DPS spec, and a ranged DPS spec. I suppose with the old talent systems, though, that made it more difficult. Because you didn't really have roles like that. You just had class abilities, didn't you? But it was still doable. Because you still had, you had shamans and druids that had that old talent system and were still, they could be melee or ranged. But it just baffles me to now that they didn't come up with a ranged option. for Death Knights, and especially Demon Hunters, because by the time they're dealing with Demon Hunters, they know there's too many melee. So they had no excuse for that one at all. But anyway, we've sort of come to the end of this one. I'll give it another few minutes as usual, in case anyone wants to throw anything out. And then we'll come to an end of that one. You thought Demon Hunters were ranged when they got announced. I don't know, I was a bit dubious. I was more hoping that they would have a ranged option, but I was so jaded by the fact that they haven't had any ranged options added in the game since the start, that I wasn't at all surprised when I found out what the situation was. Am I streaming any gameplay? Yes. I need to go off for like 20 minutes. And then I'll probably go on, like I said, Elder Scrolls Online, because I haven't been on for ages and I haven't done any of my Winter Veil stuff on, not Winter Veil, Christmassy stuff, whatever, which I should start doing. Yes, it was all right in the end, wasn't it? Yeah, as I say, I did that poll on YouTube and there were 37 people sort of said they'd be here, which there was a point today when we had in excess of 37 people, so they didn't potentially lie. So that was okay. But yeah, I'll call it to an end there. I'll be on in 20 minutes time streaming something. I just need to first of all remember my password. It is actually that been long on. I might have to try my password a couple of times, and then get myself set up with something. But yeah, then I'll go on. I might swap around a few games, but I will be on with something then. So thanks very much for coming on, and I will see you later.